My name is Lily Carter, and I'm about to tell you how a crumbling house in Montana made me $12 million richer than my golden child sister. 6 months ago, I sat in a mahogany paneled law office, watching my husband choose his seat, next to my sister Emma, not me. The will reading that followed should have destroyed me. Emma inherited our parents' $2 million Victorian mansion. I got a rotting shack in the middle of nowhere. My husband threw my suitcase on our lawn that very night, telling me not to return until I'd claimed what we deserved. But what I found in that abandoned house's basement changed everything. Before I reveal how a rusty key and a hidden clause brought Emma to her knees at her own charity gala, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this story. I'd love to know where you're watching from and what time it is there. It all started with a phone call from my parents' lawyer. The law office of Henderson and Associates occupied the top floor of Helena's oldest building, its windows overlooking the Capitol where my parents had built their life. I arrived in my 2015 Honda Civic, the paint oxidizing despite my best efforts. Emma's white Tesla Model S was already parked in the visitor spot. Of course, she'd arrived early to stake her claim. Inside, she sat cross-legged in the leather chair closest to Mr. Henderson's desk, her Hermes Birkin bag placed deliberately where everyone could see it. The burnt orange leather probably cost more than my annual teaching salary. She didn't look up from her phone when I entered, just continued scrolling through what I assumed were condolence messages from her 100,000 Instagram followers. Lily, David, my husband, barely acknowledged me before turning back to Emma. We were just discussing the estate's potential value. Were they now? I took the only remaining seat, a straight-back chair near the door, and watched them whisper. David had positioned himself between Emma and me, a choice that felt deliberate. His Brooks Brothers suit, the one I'd bought him for our 5th anniversary, seemed to mock me now. Mr. Henderson entered, carrying a manila folder that looked surprisingly thin for an estate worth millions. Behind him, a portrait of my parents dominated the wall. Mom in her teaching awards, Dad with his geological survey equipment. They'd been killed in a car accident 3 months ago, returning from their cabin in Whitefish. Shall we begin? Henderson's eyes lingered on me with something I couldn't quite place. Sympathy? Or was it anticipation? Emma finally looked up, her professionally sculpted eyebrows arching. Let's get this over with. Some of us have actual responsibilities. Right. Her influencer career was clearly more demanding than teaching art to underprivileged teenagers. 3 months. That's all it had been since the accident, though it felt like a lifetime. While Emma had immediately posted a black and white photo of herself at their grave, garnering over 100,000 likes and a flood of sympathy, I'd been the one sorting through their belongings, choosing hymns for the service, writing thank you cards to the colleagues from Dad's geology firm who'd attended. Your parents were so proud of Emma's success, our aunt had said at the funeral, squeezing my sister's manicured hand. 100,000 followers. Robert always showed me her posts. What she didn't mention was that I'd been the one sitting with Mom through her chemotherapy 5 years ago, driving her to appointments while Emma was building her brand in Los Angeles. Or that Dad had called me every Sunday to discuss his latest mineral surveys, his voice lighting up when I asked questions about copper veins and geological formations. David had complained about those calls. Your father's obsession with rocks is exhausting, he'd said more than once. Thank God Emma got the business sense in the family. The business sense. That's what he called Emma's ability to monetize our mother's death, with a sponsored post about grief, featuring a luxury watch brand, no less. Meanwhile, I'd taken unpaid leave from teaching to handle the estate paperwork, the funeral arrangements, the 1,000 small decisions that death demands. The house in Whitefish is worthless, David had insisted when we'd first heard about it. Probably some shack your dad bought on a whim. Emma will get the Victorian for sure. She's the one who deserves it. Deserves. That word had lodged in my chest like shrapnel. What did any of us deserve? Emma, who'd visited our parents twice in the last 5 years? David, who'd rolled his eyes through every family dinner? Or me, The daughter who'd stayed close, who'd listened, who'd cared? Mr. Henderson cleared his throat, pulling me back to the present. Before we begin, I should mention that your parents updated their will just 6 months ago. Emma's head snapped up. David leaned forward, and that look in Henderson's eyes intensified. Let's start with the tangible assets, Henderson said, spreading photos across his desk. The first showed my parents' Victorian mansion, 6 bedrooms, wraparound porch, views of Prickly Pear Lake. The crown jewel of Helena's historic district, worth at least $2 million in today's market. The second photo was blurry, taken from a distance. A wooden structure, barely visible through overgrown pines. The property at 48 Mountain Ridge Road, Whitefish, Henderson said carefully, approximately 100 miles from the nearest town center. Emma laughed, a crystalline sound that filled the room. God, that place. Dad bought it 20 years ago, didn't he? Some failed investment? It's been in the family since 2004, Henderson confirmed. David pulled up Google Maps on his phone, zooming in. There's nothing there. It's literally in the middle of nowhere. He showed the screen to Emma, not me. The road isn't even paved for the last 10 miles. Emma fingered the Tiffany necklace at her throat, Mom's anniversary gift from Dad, somehow already transferred to her possession. Well, we all know who's getting what. Mom always said I had the eye for real estate. Real estate. Is that what she called the Victorian, where she'd hosted exactly one sponsored dinner party, using our mother's Waterford crystal for content? I touched the simple silver band on my right hand, Grandma's ring, the only jewelry Mom had left specifically to me before the accident. It felt warm against my skin, a small comfort in this cold room. Henderson's assistant entered with a tea service, and I noticed how his hands trembled slightly as he poured. Was he nervous? The lawyer kept glancing at me with that strange expression, like he was waiting for something. Shall I read the will now? He asked, and everyone nodded. Everyone except me. I was watching his hands as he opened the folder, noting how he'd placed a second, sealed envelope beneath the main document. I, Robert Carter, and I, Margaret Carter, being of sound mind and body, do hereby bequeath our earthly possessions as follows. Henderson's voice was steady, professional. To our daughter Emma Catherine Carter Whitfield, we leave the family home at 1420 Mansion Avenue, Helena, Montana, including all furnishings and contents therein. Emma's smile could have powered the city. She actually applauded, her wedding ring catching the light, a 3-carat diamond that had somehow upgraded from the modest stone I'd seen at her wedding. To our daughter Lily Marie Carter, we leave the property at 48 Mountain Ridge Road, Whitefish, Montana, and all structures and contents therein. Silence. Then David shot to his feet. This is insulting. His face flushed red. Lily devoted everything to them, and they leave her some shack? It's quite clear, Henderson said mildly. There are also some personal effects. Personal effects? Emma laughed again, this time with an edge. Oh, Lily, I'm so sorry. But honestly, Mom and Dad knew who could handle real responsibility, who could maintain their legacy. She turned to our assembled relatives, 5 cousins who'd come to witness the reading. It's not personal, it's practical. Practical. There it was. The family consensus already forming. Poor Lily, the teacher who couldn't even manage her own husband, inheriting a ruin while successful Emma got the mansion. There's more to the will, Henderson continued, but Emma waved him off. What more could there be? Lily, listen, I'll give you $50,000 from the house sale. Call it a sister's gift. You can use it to fix up that shack or whatever. But the lawyer wasn't finished reading. His eyes met mine as he quietly slid the sealed envelope across the desk to me. There's also this, Mrs. Carter, to be opened only at the property. My fingers closed around it. The paper felt expensive, heavy, like it was hiding something. 50,000? David's voice dripped contempt. Emma, that house is worth $2 million. Don't insult us with charity. Charity? Emma's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose. I'm being generous. That whitefish property is probably worth less than my car. Our cousin Patricia leaned over to whisper to her husband, loud enough for everyone to hear. I always wondered why Lily didn't push herself more. Teaching high school art. She trailed off, shaking her head. We should contest this, David announced, pulling out his phone. I'll call my lawyer right now. This is clearly undue influence or diminished capacity. Your parents were completely sound when they updated their will, Henderson said firmly. I have the medical evaluations if you'd like to see them. Emma stood, smoothing her designer dress. David's right about one thing, though. This does seem unfair. Lily was always there for them. She paused, letting the words hang. But being there and being capable of managing an estate are different things, aren't they? The condescension burned worse than anger would have. Our cousin Mark nodded sagely. The art teacher and the influencer. Makes sense who got what. I remained silent, turning the envelope over in my hands. It had weight to it, something besides paper inside. David snatched it from me. What's this about? Another humiliation? That's for Lily to open at the property, Henderson said sharply. Those were your parents' specific instructions. Instructions, Emma mused. They always did like their little mysteries. Remember Dad's treasure hunts when we were kids? Her voice softened with what almost sounded like genuine nostalgia. He'd leave clues everywhere. I remembered. I'd been the one who always solved them while Emma got bored and wandered off. David thrust the envelope back at me. We're leaving. This is degrading. But as I stood to go, Henderson's assistant pressed something into my hand, a business card with a number written on the back. Call if you need anything, he whispered. Anything at all. Emma was already live streaming in the parking lot, telling her followers about her bittersweet inheritance. The drive home was silent except for David's breathing, sharp, angry exhales that filled the car. He didn't speak until we pulled into our driveway, and then the words came like a flood. Your parents always knew, didn't they? Knew you were a failure. The word hit me like a physical blow. David? No, Lily. No more excuses. You're 35 years old, teaching finger painting to teenagers, while your sister built an empire. And now even your own parents acknowledged it. He was already at the bedroom closet, pulling out my suitcase, the one we'd bought for our honeymoon 8 years ago. You want to know what Emma texted me during the reading? She offered me a position at her management company, marketing director, 6 figures. You've been texting with my sister? Someone has to think about our future. He threw clothes into the suitcase without folding them. You're an embarrassment, Lily. To me, to your family, to everyone. It was 10 p.m. Rain had started falling. Where am I supposed to go? To that shack in Whitefish. Figure out how to contest the will, or convince Emma to trade properties, or I don't care. Just don't come back until you've gotten what we deserve. He dragged the suitcase to the front door. Pack light. You won't be gone long. Either you'll win, or we're done. David, please. It's late. It's raining. Should have thought of that before you spent your life underachieving. He held out my car keys. The Honda suits you anyway. Rusted, outdated, barely functional. I took the keys, my hands steady despite everything. And if I don't come back? Then Emma was right. You're not capable of handling real responsibility. He closed the door. I heard the deadbolt turn. I stood in the rain, suitcase at my feet, envelope in my pocket, and for the first time in years, I felt something besides resignation. I felt curious. If you've ever felt undervalued by the very people who should love you most, please leave a comment below. I read every single one and genuinely want to hear your story. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the shocking ending that's coming. By morning, Emma's Instagram post had gone viral. A photo of her standing in front of the Victorian mansion, overlaid with text. Bittersweet inheritance. Grateful my parents trusted me with their legacy. Hashtag blessed, hashtag family, legacy, hash responsibility. 500 comments and climbing. You deserve it, Emma! Your parents knew best. So sorry for your loss, but happy they recognized your success. Someone had tagged me. The replies under my name were worse than the post itself. Feel bad for the sister. Teaching doesn't pay, I guess. This is why you need to think bigger, ladies. I sat in my car in the school parking lot, reading each comment while rain drummed on the windshield. My phone buzzed. The principal. Lily, perhaps you should take some time off. The situation with your family is, well, it's becoming a distraction. Parents are asking questions. Parents asking questions. About why the art teacher got disinherited while her influencer sister got millions. Take the rest of the semester, she continued. We'll get a substitute. Focus on your family matters. Family matters. Like being locked out of my own home with a suitcase of wrinkled clothes. I drove to the house. My house, technically still half mine until the divorce David was probably already filing. His car was gone, but he'd left something on the porch. 3 boxes of my belongings. My art supplies. My mother's recipe box. Photo albums he'd never wanted displayed. A sticky note on top. Emma's assistant will contact you about the 50,000. Don't embarrass yourself by asking for more. My phone buzzed. A Facebook message from a username I didn't recognize. Ms. Carter, you probably don't remember me. I graduated 5 years ago. You told me to see beyond the surface. That real value isn't always visible. Don't give up. Whatever's happening, don't give up. You taught me to look deeper. Maybe it's time you did the same. I sat there, surrounded by boxes of my life, and made a decision. I started driving north, to Whitefish, to the shack, to whatever my parents had really left me. The parking lot of a 24-hour Walmart became my bedroom that first night. I'd made it 50 miles before exhaustion forced me to stop. The Honda's seats didn't recline properly. David had broken the mechanism years ago and deemed it not worth fixing. I woke at dawn to a security guard tapping on my window. Ma'am, you okay? Fine, I lied, showing him my phone's GPS. Just resting before a long drive. Whitefish. His eyebrows rose. That's 8 hours north, and there's weather coming. You got chains? Chains, of course not. David handled car maintenance, which meant he handled his BMW's maintenance. There's a truck stop 10 miles up. They'll set you up. He paused. You sure you're okay? There's nothing in Whitefish except ski resorts you can't afford and wilderness you don't want to meet. Nothing in Whitefish except my inheritance. I bought chains, water, granola bars, and a thermos of coffee that cost more than I'd usually spend on lunch. The envelope from Henderson sat on my passenger seat, still sealed, its weight somehow growing with each mile. The GPS showed the route. Interstate to Highway 93, then progressively smaller roads until the last 50 miles were marked seasonal access only. In 400 miles, turn right. I had a quarter tank of gas and 1 credit card David hadn't canceled yet. The last gas station before Whitefish was in Kalispell, still hours away. Mile by mile, civilization fell away. Radio stations faded to static. Cell service dropped to 1 bar, then none. The trees grew denser, the sky grayer, the road narrower. In 800 feet, your destination. But the GPS screen showed nothing, just a blue dot in a sea of green. No roads, no structures, no data. Arrived at destination, GPS signal lost. I looked up at the rusted mailbox barely visible through the pines. Number 48, hanging by 1 screw. I was here. The driveway was more suggestion than road. 2 ruts through tall grass that scraped the Honda's undercarriage with every bump. Pine branches slapped the windshield. After a quarter mile, I saw it. Emma had been generous calling it a shack. The 100-year-old structure listed to one side, its roof collapsed over what might have been a kitchen. Wooden siding had weathered to gray, with gaps wide enough to see through. The front door hung at an angle that defied physics. I parked and sat for a moment, engine ticking as it cooled. This was it, my inheritance, my parents' final judgment on my worth. The door wouldn't open until I threw my shoulder against it. Inside, dust rose in clouds thick enough to choke on. Something scurried across the floor, mice or worse. Bats erupted from a hole in the ceiling, their wings stirring years of neglect into a whirlwind of decay. No electricity. The light switches clicked uselessly. No water. The taps gave a dying groan. The floorboards felt soft with rot beneath my feet. I made it to what had been a living room before the tears came. Not gentle tears, but body-shaking sobs that echoed off broken walls. 35 years of being the responsible daughter, the one who stayed close, who cared, who listened. This was my reward. This ruin. My phone had no signal to call anyone, not that I had anyone to call. David was probably already in Emma's guest room, planning his new six-figure life. Emma was posting about sustainable grieving or whatever sold this week. But as I wiped my eyes, I noticed something odd in the dust. Footprints, recent ones, leading to a corner where the floor looked different. Newer wood, carefully fitted. Someone had been here. Recently. Why would anyone come to this forgotten place? The envelope. I'd forgotten about it in my misery. I tore it open with shaking hands, and something heavy fell out. An antique copper key, green with patina. Inside, a single sheet of paper in my father's precise handwriting. Lily, my observant daughter. The real treasure requires vision, the kind you've always had. Look where others wouldn't bother. Love, Dad. P.S. You always saw what Emma missed. I turned the key over. It was old, far older than the house, with elaborate scrollwork, but every lock I could find was either broken or standard hardware store issue. The footprints in the dust led to the corner where the floorboards looked newer. I knelt, running my fingers along the seams. There, a section that shifted slightly under pressure. I pried at the boards with my car key until one lifted, revealing not a hiding spot but a trapdoor with modern hinges. And a new lock, definitely not 100 years old. Stainless steel, industrial grade. Someone had installed this recently, but the lock didn't match the antique key. I searched for another hour, checking every wall, every remaining cabinet. Finally, in what had been a bedroom, I found it. A section of wall that sounded hollow. Behind a loose board was another lock. This one antique, tarnished brass that matched the key's patina. The key turned with a satisfying click. Inside was a small metal box, modern and waterproof. Military surplus, maybe. Inside that, a USB drive, a rolled document, and another note from Dad. The basement isn't a basement. Your grandfather knew, I knew, and now you know. The house was camouflage. RC. The basement isn't a basement? I went back to the trapdoor, pulled it fully open. Metal rungs descended into darkness. Not a basement, a tunnel. And from somewhere below came a sound I recognized from Dad's geology videos, dripping water on metal. The sound of a mine. My inheritance wasn't a house. It was what lay beneath it. I used my phone's flashlight to descend, each rung solid despite the house's decay above. 10 feet down, my feet hit stone. The tunnel stretched ahead, shored up with timber beams that looked far newer than the house. Railroad tracks ran along the floor, narrow gauge, the kind used for mining carts. The walls sparkled in my phone light, veins of blue-green running through the rock. Copper. I recognized it from Dad's samples. 50 feet in, the tunnel opened into a chamber. Modern LED lanterns hung on hooks, batteries dead, but recent models. A folding table held surveying equipment, geological maps, and a metal lockbox. The document from Dad's hidden box was a geological survey dated 6 months ago. Morrison Mining Corporation's letterhead, stamped confidential. The summary made me sit down on a crate to read it again. Estimated copper reserves, 2.3 million pounds. Current market value, $12.2 million. Extraction viable with minimal environmental impact. Awaiting property owner authorization to proceed. $12 million. Under a worthless shack. The USB drive wouldn't work on my phone, but the lockbox was unlocked. Inside were contracts, all dated 5 years ago, all signed by Robert Carter and Lily Marie Carter. My signature. Except I'd never seen these documents. No, wait. I had. Dad had asked me to sign property transfer papers 5 years ago, said it was for tax purposes. I'd trusted him, signed where he pointed. But these weren't transfer papers. They were mining rights assignments, making me the sole owner of mineral rights for the property. Emma's name appeared nowhere. A sticky note on the contract in Dad's writing. Emma would sell to the first bidder. You'll know what to do. James Morrison is waiting for your call. My parents hadn't disinherited me. They'd hidden $12 million where Emma would never think to look, under something that appeared worthless. Back in the house, I found a portable generator in a shed, new, with a full tank. Someone had been maintaining this place just enough. The USB drive booted up on my laptop, and my parents appeared on screen. They were sitting in this very room, but it looked different. Cleaner. Loved. Lily, Mom said, her voice making my chest tight. If you're watching this, then we're gone, and you've found what we left you. Dad picked up the story. 5 years ago, I was surveying near here and found the copper vein. It extends from the mountain directly under this property. We bought the mineral rights immediately but kept it secret. Emma would have sold everything the moment she knew, Mom continued. She sees dollar signs, not legacy. But you, Lily, you understand that wealth isn't just money, it's what you do with it. They explained everything. The contracts I'd signed transferred the mineral rights to me alone, separate from the property deed. Even if Emma had inherited this house, the mining rights would still be mine. But they'd made sure I got both. James Morrison was my college roommate, Dad said. His company will offer fair terms and environmental protection. He's been waiting for you to contact him. Don't wait too long, there's a time limit. Mom leaned forward. The will has a special clause, Lily. If anyone tries to force you to give up your inheritance through coercion or fraud, they lose their own. Mr. Henderson has the sealed documentation. We know Emma will try to take this from you, Dad said quietly, and we suspect David will too. We've watched him these last years, seen how he treats you. You deserve better. The video ended with Mom saying, You were never less than Lily. You were always more. We love you. I sat in the dusty room and cried again, but these weren't tears of despair. My parents had played a long game, and I was just beginning to understand the rules. I drove back to where I had cell service and called the number on Morrison Mining's contract. A secretary transferred me immediately. Lily Carter? The voice was warm, amused. I've been expecting your call for 6 months. Your father said you'd need time to find everything. Mr. Morrison? James, please. Your dad and I go way back. How much did you find? The survey says 12 million in copper. Conservative estimate. Could be 15 with deep drilling. Your father was thorough. A pause. Has Emma contacted me? Oh yes, about 50 times. She found out about the mine 2 months ago, hired a private investigator. She's been trying to buy the rights, but I told her only the legal owner can authorize extraction. My stomach dropped. She knows? She knows about the copper. She doesn't know you own the rights. That was your father's masterstroke, separating property from mineral rights. Even if she'd inherited the land, you'd still own what's underneath. How long do I have? The contract specifies 6 months from the will reading before rights revert to the estate. That's 2 weeks from now. If you sign the extraction agreement before then, you're set for life. If not, it all goes to Emma as executor of the estate. Exactly. Your father wanted to give you time to decide without pressure. But Lily? His voice grew serious. Emma's been asking about property transfer documents. And someone named David has been calling about power of attorney forms. Be careful. They're trying to steal it. They're trying to steal what they think is yours. They don't know it's already legally protected. He chuckled. Your father set this up perfectly, but you need to stay strong for 2 more weeks. 2 weeks. I could do that. James, why did my father trust you with this? Because I offered him partnership terms, not a buyout. He wanted the mine to benefit the community, not just make someone rich. I assume you feel the same? I did. Henderson's email came that night with attachments that made my blood run cold. Ms. Carter, I'm obligated to inform you that your sister has filed to contest the will on grounds of undue influence. Additionally, your husband has submitted paperwork claiming power of attorney over your affairs, citing mental distress. I've rejected both, but they'll likely try again. There's something else you should see. The attachments included emails between Emma and David, dated 3 weeks before the will reading. They'd been planning this. Once Lily gets the worthless property, she'll be devastated, Emma had written. That's when you convince her to sign it over to me. I'll make it worth your while, $500K when I sell the copper rights. David's response? She trusts me. Give me a week after the reading, I'll have her signature. More emails detailed their plan. David would claim I was mentally unstable from grief. Emma had already drafted transfer documents. They'd found a notary willing to backdate paperwork. The final email, sent yesterday. She's in Whitefish. Perfect. No witnesses there. Get the signature before she figures out what's under that shack. Henderson had added his own note. Your parents anticipated this. Please read Section 47B of the will, attached. It's what we call a poison pill clause. I read it 3 times to be sure I understood. If any beneficiary attempted to obtain another's inheritance through fraud, coercion, undue influence, or deliberate deception, they would forfeit their own inheritance entirely. The forfeited assets would transfer to the wronged party, Emma's mansion. If she tried to steal my inheritance, and I could prove it, she'd lose everything. Henderson's email continued. I've been documenting every attempt they've made. Your parents asked me to protect you, but the final move must be yours. Emma is hosting a charity gala in 10 days. I believe that would be an appropriate venue for reading the full will, including Section 47B, if you're interested. A public reading, with witnesses. I looked at the emails again, then at the mining contracts. My parents hadn't just protected me, they'd set a trap, and Emma was about to walk right into it. I spent the next week gathering evidence. Screenshots of every email, recordings of David's voicemails demanding I sign the papers Emma sent, photos of the forged documents they'd tried to file. Henderson helped, sending notarized copies of each fraudulent attempt. Your parents' instructions were very specific, he said during one call. They knew their daughters well. The charity gala invitation came via Emma's assistant. Emma Carter Whitfield requests your presence at the Helping Hands Youth Arts Benefit. Your attendance as a family member would mean so much during this difficult time. Youth Arts. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd been teaching art to underprivileged youth for a decade, while Emma discovered charity was tax-deductible and photogenic. James Morrison confirmed he'd attend. Wouldn't miss it. I'll bring the extraction contracts and the updated survey showing $15 million in reserves. Your father would enjoy this. I drove back to Helena 3 days before the gala, staying in a motel under a fake name. David had been calling non-stop, alternating between threats and pleading. Emma's messages were sweeter poison. Lily, I know this is hard. Just sign the property over to me and I'll make sure you're taken care of. It's what Mom and Dad would want. What Mom and Dad wanted was documented in their video, their will, their careful planning. The morning of the gala, I put on my simple black dress, the one I'd worn to their funeral. No jewelry except Grandma's silver ring. I loaded my briefcase with everything. Contracts, emails, the will, the USB drive. Henderson would meet me there with the sealed documentation. James would bring the mining reports, and Emma would have 200 witnesses to her downfall. You always saw what Emma missed, Dad had written. Tonight, everyone would see it. The confrontation is about to begin. If you can guess what Lily's about to do at the gala, leave your prediction in the comments below. I'm genuinely curious if your instincts are right. And if this story reminds you of someone in your life who needs to hear it, please share. They might need this message. The Helena Country Club had been transformed into Emma's vision of charity: crystal chandeliers, champagne fountains, and a silent auction featuring vacations none of the youth we were supposedly helping could ever afford. Emma stood at the entrance in an Oscar de la Renta gown that cost more than my annual salary, greeting guests with practiced warmth. The moment she saw me, her smile froze. "Lily, I didn't think you'd come." "Wouldn't miss it." I held up my briefcase. "I brought some documents about Mom and Dad. Thought the guests might want to hear about their legacy." David appeared from behind a marble column, his face cycling through emotions: surprise, anger, then forced charm. "Lily, we need to talk." "We do, publicly." I moved past them into the ballroom. 200 of Helena's elite mingled over champagne and canapes. I recognized the mayor, 3 state senators, the university president. Emma had even invited journalists from the Helena Independent Record. Perfect. James Morrison stood near the stage, studying the auction items with amusement. He gave me the slightest nod. Henderson sat at a corner table, a folder in front of him. "Ladies and gentlemen," Emma's voice rang out. She'd followed me in, damage control mode activated. "My sister Lily has joined us. As you know, we recently lost our parents, and tonight's charity in their honor means everything to our family." Sympathetic murmurs rippled through the crowd. David grabbed my arm, lowering his voice. "Whatever you're planning, stop. Sign the papers and I'll come home. We can work through this." I removed his hand. "Everything I need to say is public." Emma was still talking, weaving a narrative about family unity and shared grief. The crowd was eating it up, some dabbing at their eyes. "Actually," I said, my voice carrying across the room, "I have an announcement about the Carter family inheritance." The room quieted. Emma's smile became brittle. "Please," she said. "This is a charity event. For youth arts. I teach youth arts. I think our guests would love to hear about our parents' final wishes." I walked to the microphone. "This isn't appropriate," Emma hissed, trying to block my path to the microphone. "This is my event." "Our parents' event," I corrected, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "To benefit underprivileged youth. I've taught those youth for 10 years. You've been to my classroom once, for Instagram." David stepped forward, his finance voice activated, the one he used to convince clients to make bad investments. "Lily's been under tremendous stress. The loss of her parents, some family disputes." "Disputes?" I looked directly at him. "Like you throwing me out of our home? Or like the forged power of attorney documents you filed?" Gasps from the crowd. The journalists pulled out their phones. Emma's composure cracked. "We should discuss this privately." "Everything I need to say is public," I repeated, reaching the microphone. "Just like the will reading where you inherited a $2 million mansion while I got a crumbling shack in Whitefish." The crowd's sympathy shifted. Curious now. Poor teacher sister, rich influencer sister. The narrative wrote itself. But here's what Emma didn't want you to know. I opened my briefcase, pulling out the geological survey. "That worthless shack sits on $15 million of copper reserves." Emma went white. David's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "You knew," I said to Emma. "You've known for 2 months. You hired a private investigator, called Morrison Mining 50 times, tried to steal what you thought was mine." "I have the emails." I held them up, including the ones where you and my husband planned to defraud me. $500,000 was his price to betray me." The crowd was dead silent now. 200 pairs of eyes locked on our family drama. Emma straightened, defaulting to her influencer persona. "Lily, you're confused. We were trying to help." "Then let's read the will. The whole will, including Section 47B. Henderson stood, holding the sealed document. "The part our parents added just for you." "6 months ago," I began, my voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding my system, "our parents died in a car accident. They left behind what seemed like an unfair will. Emma inherited their beautiful Victorian mansion. I inherited ruins. I clicked the remote, and the screen behind me lit up with photos: the collapsed roof, the rotting wood, the desolation of the Whitefish property. This is what my parents left me. Their final judgment on my worth, it seemed. The crowd murmured sympathetically. Even Emma relaxed slightly, thinking I was playing for pity. But my father was a geologist. He spent 40 years studying Montana's mineral deposits. And 5 years ago, he found something extraordinary. Next slide, the mine entrance. Copper. $15 million worth, sitting under that worthless shack. I held up the Morrison Mining Survey. Verified by independent assessment. Viable for immediate extraction. Emma stepped forward. That's wonderful for you, Lily. We're all happy. You tried to steal it. I pulled out the emails. 3 weeks before the will reading, you and David were already planning. Quote, once Lily gets the worthless property, she'll be devastated. That's when you convince her to sign it over to me. David's face had gone gray. Those were private. Nothing about fraud is private. I turned to the crowd. They tried to file false power of attorney. They created backdated transfer documents. They attempted to steal $15 million from me. Even if that's true, Emma said, her voice sharp now, the property is yours. No harm done. Actually, Henderson said, stepping forward with the will, significant harm was attempted, and your parents anticipated it. He opened the sealed section. Section 47B, the forfeiture clause. If any beneficiary attempts to obtain another's inheritance through fraud, coercion, undue influence, or deliberate deception, they forfeit their own inheritance entirely. Emma swayed. What? You tried to defraud Lily. The evidence is overwhelming. Under the terms of your parents' will, you've forfeited the Victorian mansion. It transfers to Lily immediately. The room erupted. Henderson's voice cut through the chaos. May I read the exact language? Robert and Margaret Carter were very specific. The room quieted, everyone leaning in. Section 47B. We, Robert and Margaret Carter, having observed the character and choices of our children throughout their lives, hereby establish this protective clause. Should any beneficiary engage in acts of fraud, deception, coercion, or undue influence to obtain another beneficiary's inheritance, they shall immediately forfeit all rights to their own inheritance, which shall transfer in full to the wronged party. He looked up. The clause continues. This includes but is not limited to falsified documents, abuse of trust, manipulation of legal instruments, or conspiracy to defraud. Evidence of such acts may include written communications, witnesses' testimony, or documented attempts to circumvent this will. I pulled out the evidence folder. Exhibit A, emails between Emma Carter Whitfield and David Carter, planning to defraud me. I read David's promise to get my signature in exchange for $500,000. Exhibit B, falsified power of attorney documents filed with the state, claiming I was mentally incompetent. I showed the rejection letter from the state. Denied for obvious forgery. Exhibit C, backdated property transfer documents, notarized by... I looked at Emma. Your personal assistant's cousin. He's already admitted to the false notarization. Emma lunged for the microphone. You can't prove... James Morrison stood. I can. Morrison Mining has recordings of 53 calls from Miss Carter Whitfield, attempting to purchase rights she didn't own. In 12 of those calls, she claimed to have power of attorney over her sister. That's fraud. The journalists were typing furiously. The mayor stepped back from Emma as if she were contagious. Henderson continued reading. The forfeiture is immediate and irrevocable. Furthermore, any co-conspirators in such fraud shall be liable for damages equal to the attempted theft. David stumbled backward. Damages? $15 million, Henderson confirmed. The value of what you attempted to steal. Your marital assets will be frozen pending litigation. I set down the final document. This is the divorce filing, submitted this morning with a claim for damages related to conspiracy to commit fraud. David, You wanted me to get what I deserved. I am. Emma's perfect composure finally shattered completely. Mom and Dad wouldn't do this to me. They did it for you, I said quietly, to teach you that actions have consequences. They loved you enough to let you fail. The screen behind me changed to show my parents' faces, frozen from their video message. Should we play their explanation? You can't do this! Emma's scream echoed through the ballroom. She grabbed for the microphone, her designer gown tearing as she lunged across the podium. This is my event, my inheritance, my life, my… Security moved forward, but I raised a hand to stop them. Let everyone see who she really was. I'm your sister! She was crying now, mascara streaming. How can you do this to me? The same way you did it to me. Deliberately. With planning. I kept my voice level. You had 2 months to leave my inheritance alone. Instead, you conspired to steal it. David tried to grab my arm. Lily, please. I'm your husband. 8 years. I handed him the divorce papers. Were 8 years worth 500,000? That's what Emma offered you to betray me. I turned to the crowd. He threw me out of our home with 1 suitcase, told me not to come back until I'd gotten what we deserved. We can work this out, he pleaded. I'll go to counseling. My lawyer will contact yours. I looked at him one last time. You chose your seat, David. Next to Emma, not me. Live with it. Emma had collapsed into a chair, her phone out, frantically scrolling through her accounts. My followers, they're leaving. Thousands of them. The comments. She looked up at me with genuine bewilderment. How could you destroy me like this? I didn't destroy you. I just refused to be destroyed by you. The crowd was backing away from both of them now, that particular social distance reserved for scandal. The mayor was already at the exit. The senators had disappeared. Henderson approached with official forms. Ms. Carter, these transfer documents require your signature. The Victorian mansion becomes yours immediately. I signed them in front of everyone. One more thing, I announced. The Victorian mansion will become an artist retreat for underprivileged youth. The mining profits will fund free art programs throughout Montana. My parents didn't leave me wealth to hoard. They left it to share. Standing ovation. It started with my former student in the back, spread through the teachers present, then the entire room. Except for Emma and David, standing alone in an empty circle of shame. There's one more thing, I said as the applause died down. Something I discovered in my parents' papers. Emma looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. Maybe there was some escape clause, some forgiveness built in. 5 years ago, when Dad discovered the copper deposits, he also discovered something else. Emma, you'd been slowly transferring money from Mom's account, small amounts but consistent, for your lifestyle brand. She went white. That's not… Mom knew, Dad knew. They could have prosecuted you. Instead, they built this lesson. I gestured to the will. They didn't disinherit you out of cruelty. They gave you exactly what you valued: surface beauty, immediate gratification, something to show off. And they gave me what I valued, something that required vision to see its worth. But they knew you'd try to take mine too, because taking what wasn't yours had become a pattern. The screen changed to show a bank statement. Small transfers, dozens of them, totaling nearly $100,000. They forgave you for this, I said. But they didn't forget. The will was their way of protecting both of us, me from your greed and you from yourself. Emma stood slowly, whatever remained of her dignity gathering around her like armor. I'll contest this. I'll fight. With what money? Henderson asked mildly. Your accounts are frozen pending the fraud investigation. Your husband just texted that he's filing for divorce. Apparently, he didn't know about your mother's money. And your influencer income? He checked his phone. You've lost 200,000 followers in the last hour. She looked around the room, searching for one sympathetic face, finding none. I'm your sister, she whispered to me. Yes, I agreed. And I'll always love you. But I won't enable you anymore. Mom and Dad's final gift to both of us was the truth. The next hour unfolded like dominoes falling. Emma was escorted out by security after she tried to assault Henderson. David ran after her, still begging, though whether he was begging her or me was unclear. The journalists surrounded me, but I kept my answer simple. My parents were teachers. This was their final lesson. How does it feel? One asked. To go from nothing to millions? I never had nothing. I had their trust. That was worth more than any mansion. Morrison approached with the mining contracts. Ready to sign? We can begin extraction next month, minimal environmental impact. Your father negotiated excellent terms, 70% to you, 30% to us. I signed. $15 million, just like that. My phone buzzed with notifications. Emma's Instagram was hemorrhaging followers by the minute. Someone had already created a hashtag, #GreedyGrifterGala. The video of her meltdown was trending. David's firm had sent an email. He'd been terminated, effective immediately. Conflict of interest and potential fraud were cited. Henderson handed me another document. Your parents left one more thing. A letter, to be opened after the clause was activated. I opened it there in front of everyone. Dearest Lily, if you're reading this, then Emma tried to take what was yours and you stood your ground. We're proud of you. We know this was hard. Choosing justice over peace always is. The house in Whitefish was where we fell in love 40 years ago. It was a ruin then, too, but we saw potential. Just like we saw potential in you. Emma got our beauty and charm, you got our depth and strength. One is easier to see, the other is infinitely more valuable. Build something beautiful, Lily, not for Instagram but for impact. All our love, Mom and Dad. I folded the letter carefully, tucked it into my pocket. Ms. Carter? A woman approached, the principal of Jefferson High where I'd taught. We'd love to have you back. And with your new arts foundation, perhaps we could partner? I'll be there Monday, I said. Because millionaire or not, I had students waiting. I left the gala at exactly 9 p.m. walking past the valet stand to my Honda Civic. The parking attendant looked confused. Ma'am, should I bring your newer vehicle? This one's perfect. I tipped him $50, probably the first real tip he'd gotten all night from this crowd of millionaires. The local news was already reporting. Helena Charity Gala turns into inheritance drama. Emma's face filled the screen, twisted in rage, mascara streaking. David behind her, looking lost. My phone had hundreds of messages. Former students, colleagues, distant relatives suddenly remembering I existed. I deleted them all except one. Ms. C. Saw the news. You taught us to see beyond surfaces. Looks like someone finally saw beyond yours. Maria, class of 2019. I drove past my, old house. David's BMW was gone, but Emma's Tesla was in the driveway. Through the window, I could see them arguing, David gesturing wildly, Emma throwing things. By morning, the divorce papers would be served. The fraud investigation would begin. Their world would crumble like that house in Whitefish, except there was no copper underneath their ruin. I kept driving, north toward the Victorian mansion that was now mine. Tomorrow, contractors would begin converting it into the Carter Arts Retreat. The first students would arrive in 6 months, kids who'd never had a real art class, never held a quality brush, never been told their vision mattered. But tonight, I had one more stop. The cemetery was quiet, moonlit. I sat between their headstones, nothing fancy, just granite markers with their names and beloved teachers. Lesson learned, I said quietly. Though you could have just told me about the copper. The wind through the pines sounded almost like laughter, almost like them. 6 months later, the Carter Arts Retreat opened its doors. 20 students, all from backgrounds that would have excluded them from Emma's charity gala, carried their art supplies into the Victorian mansion. This place is insane, whispered Marcus, a 17-year-old from East Helena. This is really free? Everything's free, I confirmed. Supplies, instruction, even lunch. The only cost is commitment. The mansion had been transformed. Emma's influencer-perfect staging replaced with functional studios, natural light, workspace. The room where the will had been read was now a gallery for student work. Emma worked at a dental office downtown, receptionist, $15 an hour. I'd seen her once, at the grocery store. She'd turned away, but not before I caught the exhaustion in her eyes. David had moved back to Ohio, living with his mother. The fraud investigation had cleared criminal charges, but left them both financially destroyed. The mining operation had begun, carefully, sustainably. Morrison's team extracted copper worth $50,000 a month, my portion funding not just the retreat, but art programs in 12 Montana schools. I still taught at Jefferson High, still drove the Honda Civic, still wore Grandma's silver ring. The only thing that had changed was what I could give. Ms. Carter? Maria, my former student, now my teaching assistant, held up her phone. There's something you should see. Emma had started a blog. Lessons from Loss, she called it. The latest post was titled, "My Sister Was Right." I didn't read it. Some apologies come too late. Serve only the apologizer. Ignore it, I told Maria. We have work to do. That afternoon, teaching in the studio overlooking the mountains, I found myself thinking about the house in Whitefish. I'd kept it exactly as it was, ruin above, treasure below. A monument to the truth my parents knew: value isn't always visible. Sometimes the greatest fortunes look like nothing at all, until you learn to see. My parents didn't leave me an unfair inheritance. They left me a test disguised as a gift, wrapped in justice, sealed with love. Emma got exactly what she thought she wanted: the beautiful surface, the Instagram perfect prize. I got what looked like nothing but held everything. The difference? She saw a ruin and felt cheated. I saw a ruin and got curious. Value isn't always visible. My father knew that, studying rocks that looked worthless until you understood their composition. My mother knew that, teaching teenagers everyone else had written off. They spent their lives looking deeper, and in death, they demanded the same from their daughters. Emma failed that test. She chose the easy path. Take what gleams, grab what others value, never question why something abandoned might be worth investigating. She inherited a mansion and lost it to greed. I inherited ruins and found $15 million, not in spite of the ruin, but because of it. The real inheritance wasn't the copper or the mansion, or even the money. It was the lesson. When everyone sees worthless, look closer. When someone says you deserve less, ask why they're so sure. When life hands you ruins, check the basement. Sometimes parents who love you leave you less to teach you to build more. Sometimes the golden child gets the gold, while the forgotten child gets the mine. Sometimes justice comes not with fanfare, but with paperwork, not with violence, but with clauses written by parents who saw the ending before the story began. My students paint in a mansion their teacher inherited by seeing beauty where others saw shame. That's the only inheritance that matters: the eyes to see value where others see nothing, and the courage to wait for the truth to surface, even when it's buried under 100 years of dust. If this story reminded you that real value isn't always visible at first glance, please like and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Subscribe to hear more stories about quiet justice being served. And if you have your own story about a hidden blessing that looked like a curse at first, I'd love to read it in the comments. What seemed unfair but turned out to be exactly what you needed? Thank you for reading Lily's story. Until next time, remember, sometimes the best inheritance is the one that teaches you to see.